Hello, my name is Katie and welcome to my video. In honor of Nonfiction November, I am trying to post at least one nonfiction related video per week. We'll see. We'll see how this goes, but I'm trying. Today is going to be my top 10 favorite nonfiction reads. Now this was very difficult for me. I had a bit of a crisis trying to narrow it down to 10. So what we have is 10 and then a few honorable mentions. And that's just how it's gonna go. I couldn't even rank these within that 10, so I've just gone in alphabetical order because the idea of trying to rank them from 10 to 1, oh my gosh, no. There was no way. There was no way. I was having enough panic just trying to narrow it down to 10 books. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and I hope you enjoy it. The first book on my list is Victoria the Queen, an intimate biography of the woman who ruled an empire by Baird. I loved this. I was a little nervous because it's quite large, but Queen Victoria is somebody that I have long admired and wanted to know more about. And I'm really happy I picked this up because I learned a lot about her. And there were times when I admired her strength, and there were times when she actually really irritated me. But it was really interesting to look at this almost mythical figure and realize that, oh yeah, she is just a person. And it was just an incredible read. It was one of those where it doesn't even actually feel like you're reading nonfiction. It just really pulls you in and keeps you wanting to continue with her story. So I highly recommend this one. The next book on my list is Utopia for Realists, How We Can Build the Ideal World by Rutger Bregman. I might be saying his name wrong. I'm not totally certain. So if anybody does know, please put it in the comments below. This book changed the way I think and feel about a lot of things in the world that we live in, specifically in the United States, because that's where I live. He discusses a lot of ideas such as shorter work weeks, open borders, universal basic income, a lot of stuff that wasn't really talked about in the United States really until this 2020 election. And I read it last year, I think. So when a lot of these ideas started rolling out, things like universal basic income and stuff that various candidates for president were talking about, I had already had some background because I read this book. And I've actually written a paper and a speech based on some of the ideas found herein. I also thought Bregman did a lot of really great research in finding places that have experimented with his various ideas and showing their results. So yeah, if you're interested in ideas that are a little bit outside the norm, specifically in America, this might be a good one to pick up. The next book on my list is one that I've definitely talked about before, but I think it's worth mentioning again because I really did love it, and that is The Last Palace, Europe's Turbulent Century in 5 Lives and One Legendary House by Norman Eisen. This book discusses this palace. Essentially, it was the last true palace built in Europe by a man called autobiography, and it was built in Prague, I believe somewhere around the time of World War I. It may have been before it. The time span for the actual building of this house stretched years, which is unsurprising given how large it is. I'm not sure how well you can see that on the cover, but it is an enormous home. This was written by a United States ambassador to Prague. And this house, this palace, is actually where U.S. ambassadors to Prague live. So he got to live there, And it was really interesting for him because he is Jewish and his mother was from Prague. So being an ambassador there kind of felt like it was coming full circle for him. And it was kind of an interesting experience also for him because the Nazis actually held this house for a while. And they left some furniture and things there that still had like the Nazi symbol and stuff on it. So it was really interesting just hearing his discussions on that. And then the history of the house itself is pretty fascinating. So if you like books about grand houses, or if you just in general like history, I think this is a good one to pick up. The next book on my list is one that I read quite a while ago now. Probably I'd say at least 2 years ago. So my memories of it are a little bit foggy. However, some of the things that happened have really stuck with me. And that is Damnation Island, Poor, Sick, Mad, and Criminal in 19th Century New York by Stacy. This book discusses, well, now it's called Roosevelt Island, but in the time period this is taking place, it was Blackwell. And what it was is it was an insane asylum. It had several prisons, almshouses, hospitals, things of that nature. And at the time, it was supposed to be like the most modern and humane institution for the mentally ill, the sick, the poor, things of that nature. It was not. It was horrifying, some of the things that would happen there and some of the reasons that people would be sent there. I'm not sure how well known Nellie Bly is, but she was a journalist and she actually got herself onto the island and was living there like anybody else so she could get a first-hand account of the horrors that were taking place there. Oh, some of this made me sick. It really did. But as far as impactful, this book definitely hits that note. The next book is one that I've also talked about several times, and it has kind of a long title. It's The Disappearing Spoon and Other True Tales of Madness, Love, and the History of the World from the Periodic Table of Elements by Sam Kean. I read this book a year ago, I want to say. I read it while I was taking a chemistry class because I was hoping that some of the things in this book would help me to remember some of the things that I was learning in class a little bit better. And it did. It actually worked fabulously for that. This is really great because it's kind of an amalgamation of stories put together in one book, and they're all focused on the same theme, which is the discovery of various elements on the periodic table. My mom actually read this book after I raved about it, and she really liked it too. So if science history is anything you've ever been interested in, I would highly recommend picking this up. Alternatively, Sam Kean has a podcast also called The Disappearing Spoon, and he has stories similar to the ones that are in this book, except in, he tells the story in podcast form, and they're roughly around 20 minutes an episode. So very, very low commitment and just great fun. The next book is one that I read fairly recently. I had it on audio. It was Devil in the Grove, Thurgood Marshall, The Groveland Boys, and the Dawn of a New America by Gilbert. I know I've talked about this book before. I think I had it in maybe my August wrap-up. I can't remember. But if you really want to get a good look at race relations in America, not really so much as how they are now, but how they were in the past, this is an excellent look at it because it pulls no punches. It tells things like they were, and it really is interesting to draw parallels between how things were in that time. It's roughly like late 1940s, early 1950s-ish, and you can draw parallels with what was happening then and what is happening today, which is kind of disgusting because it doesn't feel like a whole lot of progress has actually been made. In general, I found the book to be fascinating but heartbreaking. It was a hard book to read. What was really interesting, though, was learning about Thurgood Marshall. I believe he was the first black Supreme Court justice, I think. But anyway, Thurgood Marshall, he argued Brown versus Board of Education in the Supreme Court. He worked for the NAACP. Great man, but this book also makes sure to humanize him. It doesn't try to put him on a pedestal. It shows his greatness, yes, but it also shows places in his life in which he failed, particularly in his relationship with his wife. And I really enjoy when books do that, when they just go ahead and they show the good and the bad, so you can get the whole picture and see them as the human beings that they are, and not just as like some mythical figure. So yes, be cautious going into this because it's not an easy one to read, but it is absolutely excellent. Next up on my list, to no one's surprise, is The Radium Girls, The Dark Story of America's Shining Women by Kate Moore. I read this September, I think. Oh my god. Such a good book. It is probably one of the only books that has evoked that level of emotion in me, and I swung from high highs to low lows depending on what was happening, because the way that Kate Moore wrote this, it's very easy to get attached to the women and their stories. It is a little bit gruesome in certain parts because the radium eats away at their bodies, and she does kind of describe what's happening to them. So if you have an incredibly weak stomach, probably not the book for you. If, however, you don't, I highly recommend reading it. It is so, so incredible. The next book on my list is Undeniable: Evolution and the Science of Creation by Bill Nye. I think I've actually read this book twice now. If I'm not mistaken, I think I read it once, and then I listened to it on audiobook once. There's kind of an interesting backstory to this. So, several years ago, I want to say it was roughly 2013, Bill Nye had a debate with a well-known creationist, and he wrote this book as kind of a long-form response to that debate. I watched that debate. I've actually watched it probably 3 times. This book definitely does flesh things out a little bit more. So if you have questions on a lot of the things that he said, the answers are in this book. I also personally just learned a lot about just the history, honestly. I learned a lot about evolution and how that works, and how there were a lot of misconceptions that I actually had about it until I read this book. I honestly, this is not, from what I recall, it's not actually that science heavy. To me, it feels more like a history. So I think a lot of people could actually enjoy this book. You don't have to really be into science per se to get something out of it. Next on my list is the book that I am currently claiming to be my favorite nonfiction book just across the board, and that is The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper by Hallie Rubenhold. I think about this book on at least a weekly basis. The stories of these 5 women haunt me. Hallie Rubenhold did such a phenomenal job crafting their lives and presenting it in such a way that you feel as though you actually got to know them. And so their deaths feel personal to you. At least that was my experience while reading the book. And it is interesting because before I read this book, I thought, like a lot of people did, that Jack the Ripper was killing prostitutes. Like, cut and dried, that is the story that is generally presented. But then you hear about these women and you learn about them and you realize that's not actually the case. And what was even more interesting is I feel like I learned a lot about Victorian England. The things that people had to go through. And it honestly felt as though women in particular were just one wrong move away from the poorhouse, away from living on the streets. And it makes me really appreciate the time in which I am living right now, where I don't need a husband to be successful. If something happened to me and I could not stay in my marriage, it wouldn't essentially be a choice of staying where I'm miserable or living on the streets. I have options that these women just did not have. And I really, really loved learning about that because it made me appreciate the life that I do lead. The last book on the official list is Sea People, The Puzzle of Polynesia by Christina Thompson. I read this book in August for the History Challenge, and it was great. Christina Thompson is a phenomenal writer, and she's able to take essentially like a multidisciplinary approach to studying the origins of the people of Polynesia. She discusses linguistics, like seafaring, a whole bunch of things, to try and discover, the puzzle of where the Polynesian people originated from. And it was a fascinating look that really just draws you in. And I had an absolutely wonderful time with it. Okay, next up is just a few honorable mentions, and I'm calling them honorable mentions because they're all a little bit different in some way than the other books on this list. The first one is Neil Patrick Harris's Choose Your Own Autobiography. It is so typical of Neil Patrick Harris to write his autobiography in the style of a Choose Your Own Adventure book. And it was so well done. So much of this book had me rolling laughing because he's just a funny guy. And even aside from that, he's actually led a pretty interesting life. And I think that you don't even necessarily have to read a lot of autobiographies to enjoy this. If he's a person that you have found that you like, then maybe pick this one up and give it a go. I've actually read it 3 times because I just think it's great. Next in my honorable mentions is actually 3 books. It's the March trilogy by John Lewis. This is basically John Lewis's life story in graphic novel form. And it's really good. Like, I read graphic novels here and there, so graphic novels are a format that I'm comfortable with. If you're not, you may struggle with this a little bit, although I will say that there are a lot of words. More words than would be typical for a graphic novel. But I think that's to be expected when you're giving literally your life story. I think especially as John Lewis passed away recently, this might be a really good time to pick this series up if you haven't already, and if you're interested in his life, but also if you're comfortable with the graphic novel format. The last one is very, very unique. It's How to Invent Everything, A Survival Guide for the Stranded Time Traveler by Ryan North. This is so funny. I laughed out loud so many times during this. You definitely have to read the footnotes throughout. So great. This book is essentially written as though it's real. He has written it as though you actually pulled this out of, your time machine, and like you're screwed, and this is your guide to survive wherever you've been stranded. Oh my god, it is so funny at times. And it's really great too because the way it's written, You can definitely just flip through to the chapters that you're interested in. You don't necessarily have to read it all the way straight through in one go or anything like that. I didn't skip around a whole lot, but I think if I revisit this book, I'll probably just go back to the sections that really interest me. So those are my list of my 10 favorite nonfiction reads, plus my honorable mentions that I couldn't quite leave off, but didn't think they maybe necessarily fit in perfectly with the rest of the list. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you would like to read any of these books. If you like my content, subscribe, stick around. I'd love to see you in my comments. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.